All right, so I'm back in home base, and I just wanted to take a little bit more time now that I've had some time to go and reflect the results of the race. And I'm also looking at some of the times and the splits, whether it be a swim, bike, and a run, and just give more or less a better overview of kind of how the race went. I previously filmed my initial thoughts of how the race had gone, but I didn't really like the quality of that video, so that was omitted away from the originals. And so I wanted to give myself a mulligan, more or less, to talk a little bit more about how my Ironman Washington 70.3 race went. And so this will be part of a compilation of the race vlog that I've put in, but this will also be posted as a separate video. So just wanted to go through a little bit with how my thoughts were going into the race, as well as the execution, which I think is going to be a repeating thing for me, and also with overall how it felt, the experiences, and more or less analyzing and looking into the stats a little bit further. So with that, let's dive right into it. Okay, so looking at the swim. So the official swim time is 28 minutes and 39 seconds. I would say that this swim was definitely the best swim that I've had in a very long time. In my history of 70.3 race swims, I would say this ranked on the top of them. And I think part of the preparation going into this race, I knew that I wanted to get into a rhythm fast, and maintain that rhythm. And there was a lot of pole work that I did in the pool, where I was more or less just focusing on dialing into what that race pace was going to be. And if not a little bit harder, a lot of threshold interval efforts, and I toned it back a little bit, but kept the high turnover. And that's essentially what carried me through with the swim. And overall, that was executed very well. I wore a sleeveless wetsuit, and the water temperature was just nice. It was just perfect. And so I really couldn't have asked for a better performance. I didn't put everything onto the swim. I could have easily, based on feel, looking at the watch, I probably could have gone 26 and a half minutes, but there was no need to do that, especially knowing that this was going to be a long race, and it was going to be a long day. And so the swim overall turned out really well, and I executed just to plan. Albeit the entrance to the swim was a little bit shaky, but once I got to the start line, then the mind just immediately went in and zoned into what I needed to execute on the race plan. So that's the swim portion. So now looking into transition and going into the bike, I decided to take my time in transition. There was no need for me to do a big rush with, first of all, it did rain hard the night before. There was going to be a lot of debris, and there was a forecast that it was going to rain for pretty much the entirety of the bike, or at least that's what the forecast said. But it ended up being that the roads were more or less wet. There were some times where the rain was coming down really hard, but I would say 80% of this bike ride was fairly dry. But I wanted to plan for what could be a worst case scenario, which is to have a completely wet bike ride. And so what I did in transition was I had my winter cover booties on top of, or covering over, my tri shoes. And I also wanted to make sure that my feet were going to be at least a little bit warmer than freezing. And so I also decided to wear a set of socks. And that, having the booties and wearing the socks, was probably the best decision that I made for this race. I knew it was going to be, I knew from Lake Wilderness a couple of months prior where my feet were just absolutely freezing coming out, and that was not a good feeling. And I did not want to replicate that, especially given that Lake Wilderness is only half the distance to the 70.3, and so I wanted to make sure that at least I wanted to be as comfortable in the uncomfortable part as I could. So I took my time in transition. So with a T1 time, as I'm looking through my computer here, it's 5 minutes and 3 seconds, which is definitely not the fastest transition. It was definitely on the slow side for me personally, but I really wanted to make sure that I got all the equipment in and fully protect my feet as much as I could, because having a feeling on the feet as you're pedaling hard is a really important thing, at least with part of my execution. And that turned out to be the case throughout. Throughout the bike course, so the bike, I did this in 2 hours, 30 minutes, 2 seconds. I could have gone 2:29. It was like, so close there. But at the same time, I just more or less said, stick with the race plan, which meant that I did not go out hard in the beginning. I wanted to make sure that I saved some energy for the couple of hill climbs that were going to come in the beginning part. And then towards the end, I think mile 45, I put out the video in the recon segment. So go check that video out. In the bike recon, I wanted to make sure that I held around what my 240 watt power would be. So just right at the teetering edge between high zone 2 and zone 3, low zone 3 for me. The wattage ended up turning around like 220 some odd watts, but the normalized power was right at 240. So I knew that just from a number standpoint, I executed to the plan. And the hills they came by really quickly, and it was funny because I was with like this group of 8 or 9 riders, and they were all bunched together because we were all planning to go around the same speed, and we were trying to pass each other, and it was kind of a mess. And then I pulled away for a little bit on all the flat sections and on the downhills, and then they caught back to me when it was the uphills. So everything kind of washed out in terms of trying to get good positioning and making sure that we had the right distance, which was a little bit difficult given that I was kind of out in front of everyone. Really with the top bikers, and going into transition 2, actually I was probably in the top 15 places. I think I ended up 13th from the bike going into the run. So was very happy with the bike performance overall. I didn't flat, and I'll tell a little bit more afterwards on that, but I did not flat on this bike course. So I was super happy with that, and I was a little bit concerned with fluids. I didn't think I was drinking enough, and it definitely showed a little bit on the run, partially because, well, everybody was soaked through because of the wet weather. And so that kind of fooled me into thinking I was drinking enough fluids when in fact I wasn't. So that's something to work on for race day if there was going to be any improvement in there. But the rain didn't help out in that either. So going into T2, after 2.5 hours of bike riding, I definitely need to use the bathroom pretty badly. When the weather gets cold, I tend to want to use the bathroom more. So I took the bio break, which was very much needed, and a very good decision that I did that in of course, the transition porta potties. But again, I did not rush transition. I wanted to make sure that I got my gear on. I swapped out my socks, so I swapped out to a new clean, dry pair of socks, which definitely helped. I didn't want to go into this run with wet feet, and so made that a priority. And so that took a little bit of time to get the wet socks off from the bike and put in the dry socks for the run. That ended up being a really good decision, and I did decide to take a little bit of fluids in there because I knew it was going to be a tough day, and I knew I was running a little bit low, so I took some fluids, but I knew it wasn't enough, so I knew I was going to be hurting, and got out of transition in 5 minutes and 10 seconds, which was not a very fast transition. And again, it was more, I think, there was a long run over, long run over to the beginning of the run. And so that took some time. And then going to the run, so I had on my launch here, I actually had the best half marathon run. Now, I don't know if this course is exactly 13.1 miles, but the watch was saying 12.8, but some people were getting 13.0, so I'll take more for less. But a 1 hour, 39 minute, 28-second half marathon in a 70.3 race, looking at my records through here, is the best run that I have ever done. So, with that being stated, the run went very well, and I was in a lot of pain, admittedly. My right foot was definitely hurting. I didn't feel my left foot for about 2.5 miles, but that was more or less to be expected because I knew my feet were going in cold. And but aside from that, again, stuck with the plan. Even though I knew I was hurting, I just stuck with the feel and stuck with the plan. And the speed and the pace turned out to be better than I expected, or at least better than it felt. And so it was probably a little under 7 minute 40 pace for me, which for being in the top 30 or 40 races, that's on the slow side. But again, I just stuck with the plan and just figured out, all right, what was it that I needed to carry me through to the finish line. Given that this is also my first true trail run, the trail shoes definitely started hurting, and I didn't have any quads, probably because of some of the climbing and some of the power that I took later in the course to more or less establish position. But aside from that, it was a good run, although it definitely didn't feel that way. And I would say probably after mile 3, I was just in pain. And after mile 11, my right foot was just in agony. And you end on an uphill going into the finish, so until the very last downhill part where you're going right to the finish line. But it was not the easiest run for me, but definitely a run that I can only pat myself in the back and say that I executed very well, at least to the plan that I had thought in motion. And so overall, the time was 4 hours, 48 minutes, 21 seconds, which again was good enough for me to give myself and put myself into a chance to qualify for Worlds. And in the earlier video, yeah, you could tell I was a little bit excited about qualifying for Worlds. So I'll just leave it at that. And overall, the summary is the race went well to plan. I was not the most fit that I could be for this race. There were definitely opportunities where I wanted to get a little more training, but I couldn't because of work. And that being stated, it went well. Alright, if you like the content of this video, go and hit that subscribe button for me, and hit the like button, of course, as well. And if you want to get further notifications of when I do post videos out there, then go and hit the bell notification. That helps out this channel. And until then, I'll see you on the race course or in the next one.